Everybody's experienced the Monday blues. There may even be some days when you've chosen to call in sick because you need a day off. But a recent trend, particularly among young people joining the workforce, has caught the attention of companies and recruiters. It's being called micro-retirement. Gen Z is saying that it does not want to wait till 60 to enjoy time away from work. It wants to take those breaks now. The people that are contemplating micro-retirement are okay with months or even a year without being paid because they feel that they need these breaks to ensure work-life balance. To some of you, this concept probably sounds appealing. And of course, to others, it's hard to wrap their heads around it. This is Your Money Matters on NDTV Profit, and I'm Alex Matthew. And on today's episode, I want to discuss whether this is possible. And not just that. I want to also talk about what you should do if you are out of a job, either by choice or by circumstance. Joining me in studio is Vatsal Majithia, who is registered investment advisor and co-founder of The Financialist, to talk about the financial aspects of this choice. And also Jitin Chawla, who is joining us from New Delhi, career coach and counselor, to talk about the career aspect of this. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining me today. I will come to you first, Jitin, just to give me perspective on this trend, because I'm sure that you advise people and people are probably consulting with you. Is this a new trend or is it something that existed? Because you hear often, not in India, but you hear in Europe people taking time off all the time, perhaps even in the US. Is this a Western world concept, or are you seeing more of it here in India?
I remember 17 years back while traveling on a train journey. I was coming from Varanasi and I met her with a Japanese girl, and she was on and off for 3 months and she was traveling all over India. And I was really surprised that, hey, you are 23 and you're at the cusp of your career and you have just completed something, but still you have taken time off. So yes, the developed world, a lot of people would take sabbaticals, time off in between and so on. But in the last 4 to 5 years, this trend has been catching up in India. It will be surprised not only for people in between jobs or people who are gainfully employed, but even after school. So some universities started off with, Atria in Bangalore was the first university to start off with a gap year program, where they said after 12th, take a gap, think, do activities, do internships, do this, do that, and then you decide which side to go. So it also happens that somehow the school structure is such that a lot of practical exposure is limited, and hence people need it. So think of a student. I'm a student. I start off in my journey. I'm doing well. I take up certain subject areas. I do well there also. I do well in competition also. I land up at an engineering college, a top engineering college. After 3 years, I find out that hey, I'm not really interested. So maybe I can change at that time, but maybe there's a lot of steam and I'm being prodded by everyone. Hey, you're getting a good job. I get a job of 18-20 lakhs per annum. 2 years I'm in a job and I'm tired. I don't want to do it. I am not a software testing guy. I am not a coder, and I want to change. So I hear these kind of stories on a daily basis. And then they don't know what to do. Of course, they approach counselors, career counselors like us, but a lot of people don't know what to do. So in that case, taking a micro-retirement, doing something else is important. Yesterday, I chatted up with somebody who left his job, and it was just by chance I landed up on his profile, and he now has a travel startup. Why? Because he left his job in a top consulting organization, and 3-4 months he dawdled around and wanted to do something in travel setup. So he's now come out with the integration of technology in travel, where he's trying to provide more engaged experiences of travelers who might travel together and so on. So he has some unique ideas which are just being launched. Yeah. So yes, I think in the last 4 or 5 years, this is something which has caught up in India amongst young professionals, where they do think of taking time off. But again, if I look at the parental set, so the parents are still not...
We'll come to that, Jitin, we'll come to that. But allow me to come to Vatsal on this, because of course, you are the promoter of your own company, you're co-founder of a company, but I'm sure that you interact with a lot of people who have similar thoughts, who are unsure about whether they should be in the job that they are. And the point that Jitin made is well made. Correct. But the question is, if you are taking time off, Can you though, from the financial perspective, the traditional financial planner answer to this question is only if you have enough money set aside, right?
Correct. So see, what ends up happening is it's a journey to retirement, right? Lately, there's been a good amount of FIRE revolution where you make your enough money and retire by say the age of 45, 50, 60. Now, if you'll see all these versions of retirement, right? There's a time where people would just target, oh, I need a 1 crore corpus, I need a 2 crore corpus, and there's this magical number for them. Now people are turning this money, saying that, hey, money is not the end goal, money is the means to those goals, right?
Yes.
And the goal is to have that time off. Now, if you'll classify each types of the request, right? So the conventional retirement, it say retire by 60. Then there are people who come off and say, okay, I can't work till 60, I want to do an early retirement by 50. Then there are folks who will come and say, okay, I want to retire by 50, but it's okay, from 50 to 60, I'll earn enough to take care of my expenses. But I don't need any active investment pressure on it. And now this is a new trend coming on top of that, saying that, okay, forget semi-retirement, I can work till 60, but I'll need those periodic breaks in between. Now, if you try to do number crunching around each of these versions, right, obviously the least investment requirement would be, say, simply work till 60 and, save your money till then. Compared to that, if say a person was to say, instead of retiring by 60, I want to retire by 50, the investment pressure, the requirement to reach that goal, you would almost have to triple your investments every month to retire early by 10 years. Now, if you take that a step ahead and you say, okay, I want to semi-retire by 50, saying that after 50, I'll not invest, but I'll depend on my passive income only after the age of 60. Still, the requirement goes up by almost 2x per month. Say if you're saving 20,000 per month, you will now have to do 40,000 per month.
Because you have to front load it.
Because you have to front load it. But now, what if you start taking those periodic breaks? So say if someone has 30 years or 20 years left in their, age 60, if they say you want to put a situation where I want to take a 1 year break every 5 years, or if I want to take 1 year break every 10 years to zoom out on my life, to switch careers, etc., that requirement of investment just increases by around 10 to 25%, depending on.
10 to 25%. It's not, okay, so it's not as large as I thought it would be.
That's correct. So what essentially you're doing is, instead of taking away 10 years from your active work career, if you're taking those 3 or 4 breaks, say once every 5 years or once every 10 years, you are in itself saving for more number of years compared to say an early retirement, right? And hence the affordability of that is lower. So I still not deny the fact that affordability needs to be checked, but micro retirement amongst the other forms of early retirement is a much more sustainable way of looking at it.
So the way that, and just to ensure that I'm on the right page, you're saying micro retirement but working till you're 60. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Interesting. Jitin, that's interesting perspective from the money man, right? He's telling you that might actually be a better idea for you to do. The question is, if you are in a work environment where you are employed, not self-employed, if you are employed and you're working with a company, the question is, will they let you go, and will you still be hireable in a year's time if you are not doing what you were doing yesterday?
There are 3 things to it. One is your own, background competence. So I have had a batchmate who actually used to do it, and not now. This is like 20 years back, and I studied at FMS Delhi. So this guy would work at a corporate for 6-7 months, and he was amazing at sales, advertising sales, and so on. And then he would take a break for 3 months, and then again he'll work for 7-8 months. But we all used to love him, so we used to help him, connect and get job. So I would say he was very well networked, and he had a very strong competence. He could kind of go and crack any interview. He was very much, onto it. So it is the perception. So some employers would view career breaks skeptically. But if I look at a lot of startups, if there's a startup which is a young startup, maybe anything from say 50 people to 200 people, 300 people. So it's a young startup where they see you having a competence. So I think there's no issue. If I look at the career landscape today, a conventional company would have far more stronger systems, and HR would kind of get into what you have been doing and so on, compared to a startup where getting in will be easier. So it depends where. And second is the narrative, that what kind of narrative, how are you talking about that gap? Is it an exposure which you took up? Maybe you went out for a 3-month program. Maybe you did an online course. maybe you were interested, like I talked about this guy, and you went in for traveling, and it is well documented. You have come out with your blogs and videos and YouTube channel and so on. So you have actually done something, and that's the narrative. So how strongly you give that narrative also will impact employability. Re-entry might be difficult, but if you have references, if you have a network, I don't think so. Then I think it can be taken up in the right.
Okay. So, and that's interesting perspective as well. So I started this conversation thinking a little skeptically about this concept, but based on what you're saying and based on what Vatsal is saying, it's not something that is completely out of question, and that should not be considered. Vatsal, the question is, right, you should be willing, if you are taking that 1 year off based on what Jitin is saying, of course you have to crack that interview. And I'm also curious from your perspective, because you are an employer. So if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I've been out and I've been traveling, I went to Latin America and Brazil, etc., because I want to discover life, and comes to you, would you be amenable to hiring them? One, and two, how do you plan your investments? Because you are going to spend a period without earning anything. So do you pull from that? If you're investing in mutual funds, for example, of course you have the option of selling some of those units or doing an SWP, a systematic withdrawal plan.
Correct. So answering both questions, right? So first of all, the answer to that comes from your own experience. So in the busy life as an entrepreneur, whenever I have personally or my co-founders taken travel breaks, right, we come out so positive on the other side of things. I don't see why it would be any different for any person that we are looking to hire, right? So that travel or that break, as long as you're having a coming out of age experience from that particular piece, that's nothing to be worried about, right? So in terms of the attitude and the technical aspects, both are independent. Whosoever we hire, right, has to hit those technical criteria, and that they could do with a break, without a break. Secondly, most people are looking at micro retirement. It's hard. It's wrong to paint them with the lazy side of things, right? They are doing this to reskill themselves, upskill themselves. So when they are joining the workforce again, they are more sure compared to a person who is just switching organization without a break in between, right? So it also kind of gives an added confidence to take them on board. Having said that, we've not hired any folks like this, but we've hired a couple of folks, who have achieved their fire themselves, and now they want to help the others. We have had folks, who have their own startups, but now they want to do it. They've shut that, but they bring that work ethic with us, when they come joining us. The second piece on taking care of the expense in the break here, right? So that's simply a maths on your how frequently you want to take the break. So say if you're taking a 12 months break every 60 months, right? In essentially you have to, your monthly expenses in a way increase by 20%, because every year you have to set aside 20% of the expense, so that every 5th year you have 1 year of runway with you. So that's not really a tough job, especially for people who are seeking like it, because if you'll see all the career options out there, right, there are a bunch of jobs which are stressful, which pays more, and there are a bunch of jobs which are easygoing. So you will see, even when say parents are taking say especially mothers, right, when they take breaks post the childbirth, right, some people tend to continue with their employers because the work pressure is in sync with what their parent responsibilities are. But if someone has been in a very high stress environment, they have to just stop working for a couple of years to take care of their kids, and that's actually a bigger financial loss than the former. So having that work-life balance is okay, and when you are in that high stress job, you can say that you are already making 15 months worth of pay in 12 months, because you're already getting paid higher than
you're being compensated more.
You're compensated more.
Okay, so is there a possibility, before I go back to Jitin on another point, is there a possibility of setting goals? Say every 5 years you're saving towards that. You set 20% of your existing expenses, and where would you invest something like that?
So depends on how flexible or rigid is someone. Typically, most of these career breaks are flexible. So a mix of equity and debt should work really well for them. The moment they start having clarity that, okay, in next 2 years or next 1 year, I'm looking for a break, they should, depending on the market situation, capitalize shifting their equity into debt, so that you're not too worried about withdrawing this money. So imagine if you take a career break in 2020 and you are planning for this in 2019 and the markets just crashed 50%. So this is a basic fundamentals of any goal-based financial planning, that nearer the goals you keep it more in debt, longer the goals you keep it more in equity.
Okay. Jitin, coming to you, and I'm very curious about this concept, particularly because I come from a background, and also my own personal experiences have been such that the minute I was out of college, I found the need to employ myself and take care of my own finances. I didn't want my dad paying for me, right? So that was my objective, and ultimately everybody has their own objective. If your objective is indeed to take a break, and as Vatsal has rightly pointed out, perhaps on the other side, you would find yourself much more energized. Having said that, you mentioned gainfully using the time. So from the perspective of a career counselor, aiding somebody in this desire of theirs, what would you advise them to do in the time that they have? And you can talk about the primary or the more popular jobs that are currently available right now, and say these are the avenues that perhaps you can explore.
So yes, I think first of all, a lot of avenues are available. So one thing which I've seen a lot of people do is, coaching or training. So maybe you have a skill set in certain area and you are training others in that area. I've seen people even teaching. So if I look at a lot of management institute, they always have a need for visiting faculty, particularly somebody who has had a corporate experience. I've seen people even teaming up with the institute's body which goes out and talks to corporates and start offering some kind of training, which is a part-time engagement, maybe not a full-time engagement. Then, of course, people have been, because of the boom in influencer, vlogging, blogging, podcasting. So I know a lot of people who part-time they did it, and then somehow it become a hit and they started doing it full-time also. But because of social media, because of a lot of content which people are consuming, YouTube being a big big source, so that is also a good opportunity. I attended NAS Summit in Mumbai. There were 1,500 creators. I was surprised by the kind of people. There was a person who had an agriculture background, and he had an interest in travel and tourism. And he starts so small, and he couldn't speak Hindi, he couldn't speak English. He was from some place in Karnataka, so local language. But he set up a small YouTube channel and he started recording. And he started with 2 huts, and today he's doing a turnover about 7 crores. So he's left his, so to say, other this thing, which was agriculture. Of course, when you talk about corporates, let's say somebody is in a sales function, somebody is in a coding function, somebody, you're doing certain job, you can be a trainer with the institution. That's the most easiest. There are websites like eLance, which give you freelance opportunities all over the world. There are people who get into project management if they have that expertise. So depending on what expertise you have, maybe you have a digital marketing expertise, which you are using for your own company. But now instead of, you might just take 1 or 2 clients and you are just reviewing something instead of doing the entire gamut of activities. Maybe you are helping other people in hiring.
Yes.
So it can be across domain area. It depends on what has been strong for you. But what is important is for these people is to network correctly even while you are in job and later on. Typically, when people are in job, some of the networking drops. So Delhi Management Association, National HRD Center, they meet on a regular basis. So any area, there are a lot of bodies which keep on meeting. Or Startup Saturday, excellent place to go and meet a lot of startups. So the moment you are present at different places, you have a solid network to bank upon, I think then a lot of things are taken care of.
Yeah. I mean, you are both making excellent points, and if I have a confession to make, it is that I have always wanted to study art. So perhaps, maybe I can learn from the Bob Ross School of Art on YouTube and discover that I'm a painter. But then that's besides the point. The point that I want to make, Vatsal, is Jitin.
I just the point. So there's a special entrepreneur in residence program. So a lot of places. I'm interested especially in one which is happening at Bali. And it's only for men. It's like 1 month you disappear from the face of the earth And I mean, you have to exercise, you have to be healthy, you have to no TV, no media, no phones, just work on yourself and do meditation. So it's a 1 month entrepreneur residence. So these kind of programs have sprung up in the last maybe 4 or 5 years.
Interesting. I'd have to discuss that last one with my wife. I don't know how okay she'd be with me disappearing for a month. But having said that, Vatsal, there is also, speaking of wives, right, and speaking of partners, there's also not a very common thing that you see, but I have come across this, of partners switching between the two of themselves, right? So if you have one income at any given point of time, and then you switch. So in 3 years you work, the other person stays at home and does whatever. Is that a feasible thing to do?
Yeah, obviously depending on the number. So this is very feasible in partners where the income disparity is not so high. So if both partners are contributing to almost 50% each of the total income, that works out really well. Having said that, the most common form of looking at these things, like we see lots of our clients are in the tech profile, right? We see that typically when the child is born, right, when the parental responsibility increase, typically in the early phase of child, those responsibilities are more inclined towards the mother, while father's time is equally important, but because of the physical nature of bodies, you need them around. So what ends up happening is that the mothers they take a kind of a backseat on their career, saying that they'll not switch, they'll not be as aggressive as they used to be in their 20s, right? And on the other end, the husband would keep working on the career as hardly as possible, but then the husband might retire early by the age of 45, look at consulting, and then take care of the other kids' responsibility, and wife would continue to work in the same safer, in the same less stressful environment. So depending on what's the income splits, they do consider about one partner retiring early and one partner retiring till 60. That's a very common thing to see.
Okay, now a couple more points from the financial planning standpoint, if people are indeed considering this. One is, obviously we often speak about the emergency corpus, and this is distinct from that. This is separate from that. You are saving so that you can spend a year off. It's not your emergency corpus. Would you say that somebody who is doing this would need to set up more or the standard amount? And it's not something that you can accumulate overnight. It needs some time. So how do you suggest doing that?
Yeah, so 100% requires more. It's emergency funds plus this runway corpus that you have, right? And it could be uncertain in a way that, hey, you calculated I'll join workforce in 12 months, but you don't get an opportunity at the end of 12 months, right? So it's from the 12th month that emergency corpus starts helping you, and hence these two are separate corpus. Having said that, it's also good to look at these figures from how your overall net worth and how the income, because if say both partners are not taking the break at the same time, it will just only extend the gap in the active investment, which can always be later covered up by not taking a future break that you are planning to. So it's the easiest when both people are earning. It's the easiest when say you have a family backing to support it. And given that a lot of these break years, like most of the break years requests that we get is for people who are looking to switch to entrepreneurship. Now in these kind of scenarios, thanks to us living in the knowledge economy, right? If you have a successful, or if you have an idea worth giving a shot at after you've done your initial seed work into it, you get funded, you get the initial seed round, and you don't have to really worry about expense beyond your 12 months of time. So things are much easier than it used to be 10-20 years back, and given that overall the net worth profile of most individuals is better. So like you said, when you came out of job, you did not want to depend on your parents' money, right? Back then, less parents had that capability to even support their kids.
And that's very different now.
Right. So why the developed world is ahead of us in that front is because the parents already have a bunch of savings, and that luxury is coming to the next generation only now, right? The other piece is due to all the faster developments in each sector of AI is now changing literally each field, right? Not just the tech field. The other thing, we get feedback from our client itself, right? That many techies, while say they feel they'll be overworked by 40, 45, Now they're also saying that they might get outdated by 40, 45.
That's a worry.
Right?
Yes.
So you don't joke when a cricketer retires at 38 or 40 years, you don't say, oh, he's retiring early, because that's his life of cricket. His career is 15 years, 20 years. Now there is another view that even your tech career is 15, 20 years, so you really do need to plan early retirement, not as a discretionary side of things, but as a reality, as a necessity type of things, because you'll not, the pyramid is always sharper at the top, right? So these savings are important, whether you work towards early retirement, micro retirement, you really need to keep upskilling, reskilling yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, you said it. Thanks so much for joining me on this conversation, Vatsal. Jitin, it's been an absolute pleasure. What Vatsal said about IT folks is true. They also say this about news anchors, so I have something to think about. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for taking the time. It's been a fascinating conversation. That brings us to the end of this edition of Your Money Matters. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is NDTV Profit.